News Talk 820 WBAP now on FM at 93.3. Make it a preset. Now, before we get into the Trump trial today, because a lot of stuff went down on that, before we get into that, I wanted to also share with you, don't really have any updates on Columbia University. They arrested everybody. It appears to be peaceful now. Love it. Love it. The mostly peaceful terrorists are gone. Allahu Akbar. Good luck on that, champ. Okay, 800-288-WBAP is the number, 800-288-9227. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. I did promise at 10 o'clock tonight to talk about driverless trucks. They're coming, supposedly, they're one step closer to coming large-scale expansion to our roadways. Dallas Morning News reporting they could be on our roads by 2027. By all means, you can tell me what you think about this. Large trucking firms would be having these driverless trucks, semis, going up and down our roads, and they talk about they can go 20 hours a day, etc. Major players in the automotive freight spaces are betting on autonomous technology. Toyota, Volvo, Uber, PACCAR, I don't know what that, Amazon, all investors in this company called Aurora that will do this self-driving technology, filling the gaps in the industry left by the driver shortages. That's interesting. Oh, that's sad, too, is what it is, because trucking is an amazing occupation. There's a lot of truckers that listen to this show, and I think that's sad. Now, I don't want driverless autonomous trucks, semi-trucks. What'll it be like if a driver autonomous semi-truck drives right in the side of your car? It'll be a lot worse than it would be if it was a driver car. I believe that some of them, certainly there's been instances where somebody's passed out and it just goes at full speed, but I would assume the chances of that happening with a human error would be a lot less than it would be with a driver error, autonomous driver that would just non-driver that would just drive right through you because it doesn't see you, like some of those cars did in San Francisco. I think it was, they were hitting people, killing people. I don't know if it killed people, but I've seen some of them hit them. I don't want this crap anywhere near us. So I hope Governor Abbott says no, but we'll see how that rolls. No pun intended. 800-288-WBAP is our number, 800-288-9227. Okay, Trump. Judge fines Trump for contempt in the hush money case, threatens jail time. So Trump was fined $9,000, threatened to throw him back on jail. Judge Juan Merchan, the radical leftist Biden voter and three-time Biden donor. His daughter is she runs a company that makes millions and millions and millions of dollars off of getting Democrats elected and making Trump look bad. So he has a direct conflict of interest in this. There's no question that any reasonable person in his position would hand the trial over to somebody else, would reassign it. To what's the word called that I'm thinking about? Where they will not concede, but you know what I'm saying. I forget what the word is, but there's a one-word term for it that means I'm going to take a pass on taking this trial because it's not the right trial for me. It's a conflict of interest. What is it? No. A plea is an agreement for a deal. No, there's a word for it that says I'm not going to handle this case because I'm disqualified from handling it. It's a conflict of interest. Even the appearance of a conflict of interest is something that means it's got to be reassigned. The case should be reassigned to a different judge. So anyways, but he took it, and his bias shows. It's going to be overturned most likely by the New York State Supreme Court. You know they did that with the infamous Harvey Weinstein case, right? And they literally said exactly the same thing that's going on in the trial. The New York State Supreme Court said, you cannot do that. What did they say that you could not do from Harvey Weinstein that they're doing with Trump? You cannot introduce all this evidence or these stories from other so-called victims or other people that make you look bad in an effort to help you get convicted. You cannot take in other cases that have never been adjudicated in the court of law, and therefore they're simply allegations. They brought women in who said, Harvey raped me. Well, was he ever tried on this and found guilty? No. But he did. So they took all these women coming in saying how horrible he was and how he sexually assaulted them. But their cases never went to court and were never adjudicated. So they brought these women in that said he was horrible and he raped them. And you cannot introduce stuff like that unless it's relevant to the case, meaning you can't bring an accusation. So they brought in all these other things to make him look bad, to make him look like he's guilty, that were not relevant to the specific case, and therefore the New York State Supreme Court said it's very simple, it's very easy. It has nothing to do with the guy being a sleazebag and a rapist. It has everything to do with the law. And it's the same thing with Trump. They think Trump is Hitler. They think he's just as bad, if not worse, than Harvey Weinstein. So it's the same thing with him. You cannot introduce all this evidence, like the Karen McDougal case. What does that have to do with this? It doesn't establish anything. That's not the trial. It's all about this pathetic Stormy Daniels thing. So they're bringing in Karen McDougal. They're bringing in other people. And guess what we found out, too? We found out that Arnold Schwarzenegger did a catch-and-kill story with the National Enquirer. We found out that Rahm Emanuel, the right-hand man to Barack Hussein Obama, the president, and after that, mayor of Chicago, he got a catch-and-kill story too. And what David Pecker did in his admission in those things, and it wasn't necessarily a hostile witness against Trump. They said we're gonna refrain from putting you in jail, David Pecker, if you testify. It doesn't even mean they had anything on David. It didn't even mean that David Pecker was guilty of any crime. And when David Pecker said, I believe that this was a violation of campaign finance laws. When he said that, it was not based on any fact. It was not based on any ruling. David Pecker is not a lawyer. And David Pecker was never told by his attorney, yes, you're guilty of campaign finance. David Pecker speculated on the stand that he believed the moment he did one of these cases for Trump, a catch-and-kill story for Trump in the Stormy Daniels thing, that was a campaign finance law. Well, David Pecker, that should never have been admissible because David Pecker is not a lawyer, and there was no finding of fact by a jury or a judge that was true. So you have a non-lawyer saying I violated campaign finance law, as if that means Trump did too. He didn't. He's not been found guilty of it. And he didn't make a deal. They didn't say, you're guilty of this, make a deal with us. They said, if you cooperate with us, David Pecker, we will agree not to prosecute you. But there was no deal to be had. They didn't catch him on anything. They just scared him. So he testified, but he wasn't necessarily hostile against Trump. Trump did not say anything bad about Pecker, did he? No. In fact, he's winked at him and said some nice things about him sometimes in this trial. So they backed him up against the wall, but so there's all these things that they've entered that are not legitimate. So he could face jail time, Judge Juan Merchan said. He fined him $1,000 per offense, $9,000, and he suggested he'll consider whether in some instances jail might be necessary punishment for any future violations. Guess what else? He forced Trump to delete 8 posts from his Truth Social account and 2 posts from his campaign website. Can you believe it? And he did. Trump did. I guess he doesn't want to go to jail. This is interesting. Here's what probably happened. I'm going to guess. His lawyer probably told him, you better do this, otherwise you will have to go to jail. And then is that the right thing? And Trump must have said, it's not the right thing for me to go through right now, and made a decision with his attorneys. That's kind of sad. He did get a day off for Barron Trump for his graduation, but not until just now. Waited weeks for this. He's totally hurting the president and trying to ruin his life. This is all out front, open warfare, lawfare is what this is. Trump tweeting today, the judge has taken away my constitutional right to freedom of speech. I'm the only presidential candidate in history to be gagged. This whole trial is rigged, and by taking away my freedom of speech, this highly confidential judge is rigging the presidential 2024 election interference. I agree. Questions for you. Do you think Trump violated the gag order? Period. Do you think he violated the gag order? And do you think what the judge is doing with these gag orders, saying Michael Cohen does not have a gag order? Michael Cohen, a convicted liar, called by a judge in one of his cases where he's convicted of a felony of lying and of committing felonies. Michael Cohen was called a serial liar, serial perjurer by the New York judge in the official court records. So this guy is a star witness. You understand? They're softening up the whole trial to make it to make Cohen come out in a skirt and high heels as the featured actor. He's the featured act. He's the star witness, a convicted felon, a serial perjurer is the star witness. All this is building up to the one guy who's going to say, yes, a serial perjurer. So the serial perjurer, can attack Trump. He can do interviews on MSNBC attacking Trump. But Trump cannot respond. Do you think that's constitutional? Of course it isn't. 800, but here's what I was trying to get at. All this can be appealed, but guess what? The appeal won't go down until afterwards. So this is designed to convict him. and to hurt his chances to win the election. This is lawfare. It's all orchestrated by Joe Biden. His number 3 at the Justice Department did the opening statements. He's behind all this with the Biden Justice Department, as they are with Big Fanny in Georgia. All that's coming up next. 800-288-WBAP. Do you think Trump violated the gag order, and do you think what the judge is doing to him is constitutional? 800-288-9227. 800-288-WBAP. Also, coming up next on the Chris Crock Show, I cannot wait to do a follow-up with you on, we had a caller yesterday who was talking about how I think the reason why there's people can't afford housing is because they are probably mismanaging their money. Do you think people cannot afford housing because of they can't afford it anymore because they're being irresponsible with their money, or is it because Joe Biden inflation has driven up the price of housing and mortgage rates and everything so high they cannot afford what they once could afford? Which do you think it is? Wait till you hear. We're going to replay her call, and I'm going to read you a story from the Associated Press about affluent Americans driving the U.S. economy and likely delaying the need for Fed rate cuts. They're having fun. They're fine. They don't get it for us, what it's like for us. That's next in the Chris Crock Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Make it a preset. 800-288-9227. That's 800-288-WBAP. So an interesting column today, or report today in the Associated Press. Affluent Americans are driving the U.S. economy and likely delaying the need for Fed rate cuts. I'm going to repeat that again. Affluent Americans are driving the United States economy and are likely delaying the need for Fed rate cuts. People that have more money are, here's one person, an engineer, I really have more money to spend now than when I was working. He's retired now. Isn't that amazing? He has more money now than when he was working. So that's just one person. They're talking about a wealth effect. Rising home and stock values give people confidence to increase their spending, but they have the spending as well. And so they talk about affluent Americans, okay? And we had a call yesterday that I'm going to play for you in just a second. And she was saying, we were talking about housing, and the story was, it was about housing and how a tremendous amount. In Fort Worth last year, 52% of every home sold was to an institutional investor, not to private owners. And I think it was 1 out of 4 of every homes is sold to institutional investors. This is breathtaking stuff. Governor Abbott says he's introducing in the next legislation to try to stop this, and I agree with it. So she called in, and a lady called in yesterday. Nice lady and everything, so it's not a personal thing at all. It's just saying I think she's very wrong. I think it's because my guess is she's in an affluent situation. And this story at the Associated Press is what prodded me today. Wait a minute. Affluent Americans driving the U.S. economy, likely delaying the need for a Fed rate cut. They're spending, and they're fine. They don't understand what the problem is. When people like us, you, me, that are middle class, perhaps a little bit of upper middle class, but not up there, middle class people and below are suffering in this economy. And it's like one of these things where you go, how do these people not get it? Where are these Biden voters that are coming out saying they think everything's great? And before I play this call, I wanted to set it up. So I was talking about, by the way, we also have a few other headlines I want to share with you on this. It says McDonald's and other big brands are warning today, NBC5 had this, that low-income consumers are starting to crack. Low-income consumers are starting to crack. At McDonald's, they say that. It's clear that the broad-based consumer pressures persist around the world, said the McDonald's CEO. He said consumers continue to be even more discriminating with every dollar they spend as they face elevated prices in their day-to-day spending. This article from CNBC talks about sticky inflation, which we have, as you know. Under pressure. McDonald's under pressure. Same thing with executives at 3M. They're saying the same thing. Continued softness in consumer discretionary spending. Now, you see another story, because this housing story yesterday I was talking about, and the column I'm about to play from you from yesterday, we kind of cut it up a little bit to shorten it. But she was talking about housing and affordable housing, and she thinks the reason why people can't afford to get houses or aren't being able to get in houses anymore is because they're not qualifying for loans and they're not qualified and they shouldn't qualify. Like as if it's the people's fault. She literally was saying that happily. And I was shocked. Well, here's something to share with you before we put her call on her excerpts from her call from yesterday. Interest rates are above 7%. Recent analysis shows that this is unbelievable. You ready for this? Average monthly home payments on a new home are $3,322 as of the third quarter of 2023. $3,322. That's an average home price. 90% increase since 2020 when it was $1,746. Do the math. The average house when Joe Biden took office was $1,764, $1,700, okay? Now it's $3,300. That is $1,600 a month for the same mortgage. And we have this call I'm going to play for you. I'll start it now. And it shows how out of touch some of these people are. I'm not being nasty to her, but this was a lady who called in yesterday on WBAP. Here she is, Brittany. She's from Sunnyvale.
A lot of people are renting now simply because for them, they don't have the stability in their overall lifespan regarding their job or their relationship or whatever the issue may be. And maybe they've had some credit issues or bankruptcies. And we know that renters are forgiving.
How many people that you're talking about renting, how many of them want to buy and can't afford to do it because more than half the houses in Fort Worth are bought up by institutional investors, making housing scarcity even worse and therefore driving up the price?
I mean, and is that a valid point, though? Is it because they choose not to purchase something they can afford? Perhaps, yes, we know that now in Texas, of course, the median for a house is about $400,000 to $600,000 for somewhere decent. And that's just decent. That's not to say you have children that you want to put in a good neighborhood and a good school. So it's like for that to be the stand, a lot of these citizens need to either be married or they need to be they have to have a six-figure income.
Okay. So she's literally saying you have to have six-figure income to be able to buy a house. She says $400,000 house won't even buy you a neighborhood in a nice neighborhood. That's not true at all. And she's in Sunnyvale, and I know Sunnyvale is a very, very, very nice area, and I have friends that live there. And I looked up here tonight. The average home for listing home prices right now is $800,000 for the average house in Sunnyvale. I knew it was that expensive. Everything on sale, I see there's some houses for $1.2 million. A lot of the ones are $1 million, $2 million. The median price for the houses sold, this is according to Redfin. Redfin. $637,000 the median price sold. And she says you can't even get a house in a good neighborhood for $400,000. That's we all know that's not true at all. So I don't know what her political innings are. We're halfway through the compilation. I've kind of pulled stuff out of a call that was like 3-4 minutes. And to make it a little shorter, you're going to hear her also continue on and say maybe the people just can't afford it and it's kind of their fault, is what I heard from her. Didn't you hear that, Producer Garrett? And it's like, are you kidding me? No, ma'am. The average mortgage has gone up 90% for the average monthly payment for the same house since Joe Biden took office till right now. And I feel like she's one of those, I'm not saying she is a Democrat, but she came across me as one of those Joe Biden voters who is unaffected, makes really good money, lives in a house that's $800,000 and doesn't understand why people can't afford a nice house. They must be irresponsible or be bankrupt or something. She doesn't get it. And I guess that's how you would, if you think this way and you feel this way, I guess that's how you would vote for Joe Biden. I think the economy's going fine. Well, you tell me if you think the average person has much more trouble buying a house today than they would have 3 years ago. Do you think the average person, middle-class person, could have afforded a house reasonably 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, but can no longer afford one now? And do you think it's their fault or it's Joe Biden's fault? Coming up next on the Chris Crock Show, 800-288. I'd love to hear from you on that. 800-288-WBAP, 800-288-9227. Hear the last part of this call as well. Coming up next. News Talk 820 WBAP now on FM at 93.3. Make it a preset. News Talk 820. What did I just say? News Talk 820. Now, I wanted to get to this. 800-288-WBAP, 800-288-9227 is our number. My brain scrambled. I wanted to play the rest of this call. So the story is twofold. Americans driving the U.S. economy, likely delaying affluent Americans driving the U.S. economy and are likely delaying a need for federal rate cuts. They're spending and spending and spending, and they can afford it, which is fine. But it is, I believe, a lot of these people, don't you say, who are these people that think Joe Biden's economic policies are good? Who are these people that don't understand what it's like to be priced out of buying a home at all when you do make enough money? The average income for a family of four, I believe that I looked up yesterday, was $71,000, like nationwide. Or is it that $71,000 is what you used to? That's it. $71,000 is what you used to need to get a home, the average price home in America when Joe Biden took office. But now the salary requirements are insane. I want to continue with this, though. The headlines are that affluent Americans driving the U.S. economy likely delaying the need for Fed rate cuts because they're spending a lot of money and they don't see a reason to stop, which is what's continuing the purchasing extra stuff in this country and is making it harder for the economy to contract, necessarily to go through some pain so we can get this inflation under control. The other thing in this, too, is McDonald's and 3M and other companies talking about how they're warning, and CNBC reports today that low-income consumers are starting to crack. They're not going to they can't handle all these price increases and everything. So it is with that we talked about last night the housing increase in prices and the housing supply not being able to keep up with demand in the Metroplex and thereby driving up the housing prices tremendously. And also the fact that under this president, interest rates are over 7%, and the average home with interest rates soared. From the day Joe Biden took office, the average price for a mortgage on the average home was $1,700. It now is $3,322, 90% increase for the same home. Okay? It centers on a $430,000 home with a 30-year mortgage is what the analysis centered on. This is from the New York Post. So I'm going to start at about 50 seconds into a 2.5-minute excerpted from a call last night with a woman named Brittany. She lives in Sunnyvale. I'm not ripping on anybody who lives there. I think it's a great community. One of my very good friends lives there, and it's a very well-off community. And nothing wrong with that. But she called in from Sunnyvale, and she was saying that really she thinks the reason why people can't afford houses nowadays is because maybe they're bankrupt or maybe they're perhaps not responsible with their money. She seemed to blame it on the consumer. Do you blame the out-of-control prices on housing on the people that are trying to buy the houses or that want to buy houses, or do you blame it on the policies? And my other question is, do you think the policies of Joe Biden, and do you think that most upper-class Americans have no idea how much we're suffering right now under this inflation and these housing prices? 800-288-WBAP is our number, 800-288-9227. I think about car. You cannot buy a car used right now for under 10 grand. You cannot, I'm going to repeat this again. You cannot get a decent, I'm not talking about a nice one. You cannot get a decent working car, used car for under 10 grand. That's what my mechanic told me the other day. I still find it hard to believe, but my friend has a problem with his car, and we talked, and he said he's already looked. Correct. He said, you cannot. I was stunned that he agreed, too, with my mechanic. Because my mechanic, I always think he's a little bit more demanding, if you will. So I'm thinking 10 grand means it's a really nice car. No. Like a decent car. Used. Under 10 grand. You have insurance that has gone up 22% this year. One of the highest on record ever. Mortgage average, as I mentioned, is above $2,800 a month. Groceries are insane. Energy prices for your house are insane. Gasoline is $1 or so a gallon at least than it was the day Joe Biden took office. More right now. And services, any services, air conditioning, electricity, whatever, anything for your house, goods and services are through the roof. So that's what this president's put us into in 3.5 years. Here's Brittany to finish off, though, about why she thinks people can't afford to get in the houses.
Neighborhood and a good school. So it's like for that to be the stance, a lot of these citizens need to either be married or they need to be they have to have a 6-figure income.
Okay, so my question for you then is, do you want housing to be more affordable in North Texas?
I want it to be affordable and sustainable.
I'm asking, but I'm not. You're adding things. I asked you a simple question. It wasn't complicated. Do you support? Would you like houses to be more affordable in North Texas?
I mean, I have my house, so for me,
well, see, that's the problem. That's the problem, Brittany. I have my house too. I don't need this, but I am outraged that the price of housing and the amount of available housing has been driven up, the price has been driven up, and the availability has been shrunk up. This new 52%, I mean, it's stunning to me that you would not be troubled by more than half of every home being bought and forth by institutional investors. But 28% of all homes sold in 2021 was to institutional investors in the state of Texas. We lead the nation, and this doesn't trouble you.
For me, it's a wonder of, and as you mentioned, economics. Is it because they're more dependable and they have the liquid assets to have the ability to actually purchase?
Because they buy cash, all cash, and they can outbid people as much as they want because it's a massive company versus a private family. So I appreciate your call, Brittany. Do you agree with Brittany? Do you prefer institutional investors to buy up 52% of every house and forth? Okay, that was the end of what I wanted to do. But my point is here that she was pretty much saying what was shocking to you, and she's like, well, I already have a house, I'm biased. You see, I've been in my house for a long time here in North Texas, so I have a house too, but it doesn't matter to me. I'm appalled at the prices of houses. I'm appalled that an average middle-class family can seemingly no longer afford to get a house. And she seems to be like, well, maybe they're bankrupt, or maybe they're not responsible with their money, or maybe it's because you can't have a six-figure income, so you can't afford. She's literally, it sounded to me as if she's okay with people who don't make six figures not being able to afford a house. Is that okay with you? And since she comes from a suburb here in DFW where the average house is on for sale right now is $800,000 in her area, she obviously to me is one of these upper class Americans, which it's fine, but I think she doesn't understand what it's like to be us middle class folk and such. Do you think most upper class Americans have no idea how much we're suffering right now with this inflation and housing prices? 800-288-WBAP is our number, 800-288-9227. Do you think most upper class Americans have no idea how much we're suffering right now under this inflation and housing prices? And to me, that's exactly what I heard from her. I'm fine. Maybe they just need to make six figures. Well, who's going to do our HVAC work? Who's going to do our plumbing? Now, I know there's people that are plumbers that make really good money, but they're not all master plumbers, for example. Who's going to work at our factories that we still have, our warehouses? Maybe they're making $70,000 a year. Maybe their wife's making 30. Maybe they're making 90 combined or 80 combined. They used to be able to buy a house. They used to be able to put down a payment that was reasonable. They now have to have at least, on the average, I saw the other day, $55,000 to put down on a house. When before, what was it before? $20,000, $15,000? I can't recall exactly, but you kind of get the drift here. And so I think that's where we talked to. I think our friend there, Brittany from last night. I think she's one of those people that doesn't get it. And I don't know who she voted for, but she strikes me as somebody that has the same kind of an attitude of these, Biden voters who are like, he's doing a great job. The economy's fine. Some people just can't afford to be in a house, which is to me like, it's like, the little people, it's their problem. They're not being responsible or something. And I'm like, no, that's why I think hopefully Joe Biden won't win again, because he's destroying this economy in this country and making it a country of the haves and the have-nots. And destroying the middle class. 800-288-WBAP is our number, 800-288-9227. Okay, you want me to do this? Kim coming up next? Okay, all right, Kim in Burleson, you're coming up next right out of the box on the Chris Crock Show, plus your call at News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Your button's stuck. Hey, thank you, brother. Button was stuck. I was hearing my friend over there. Also coming up next, we're going to talk about, I got a great poll for Joe Biden and his polling right now. Next on the Chris Crock Show on News Talk 820 WBAP. News Talk 820 WBAP now on FM at 93.3. Make it a preset, y'all. 800-288-WBAP is our number. That's 800-288-9227. We had a gentleman who called in, but I guess he dropped. He's welcome to call back, but he was saying he disagrees with me. He doesn't think it's Biden's fault. Is that right? He basically was saying that he thinks it's partial Trump fault, or both Trump and Biden's. Well, I mean, Trump did overspend in his last year under the COVID stuff, but Biden doubled and tripled down on that and is still doubling and tripling down on it. So Biden is done it for 3.5 years. Trump did it with the COVID stuff in that last 6-8 months, maybe you could even say last year, of some spending. But he didn't do it for the first 2 years of his spending. It was that last year with COVID stuff. But what Biden did was fill it up with gas and light it on fire 3 times over, and he still is right now. And he is shutting down gasoline, petrol. I should say petroleum production in what's funny is the Alaska Petroleum Reserve, which is federal land. He's shutting down wide swaths in the Federal Patrol Reserve area. So it's actually set aside federal land in Alaska for drilling that he's barring, and then he's allowing Iran to pump. And Iran is pumping 3 million barrels of oil a day when you know what it did under Trump? 300,000 barrels of oil. It now does 3 million barrels of oil. 3 million barrels of oil now accounts for 3% of the entire production per day in the world. And so Joe Biden's terrified of Israel not stopping the production because he stopped it here. He's stopping it here. He's slowing down. And a lot of people say it's not slowing. Look, we're having some of the highest petroleum production ever. You know why? Because what's being produced today was approved under Trump 3, 4, 5 years ago, and it's being developed. Okay, and it's working now. What Biden is doing is going to affect us in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So literally, the next president, pray it's Trump, will have to undo it. And it will take 2 years, 3 years to start seeing effects. That's how this works. And that's what people that actually are experts in petroleum production will tell you, as they've told me on this show. And I see them all the time on the news networks saying the same thing. But he wanted to talk about how Trump's just as bad as Biden. Well, I disagree. The American people, on a CNN poll today that just came out, a day and a half ago, 49% of Americans support Trump. Only 43% support Biden. That Trump has a 6-point lead nationally in CNN. And they say, looking back, 55% of all Americans now say they see Trump's presidency as a success. So far, only 39% of Americans say Biden's presidency is a success. You have a 16-point deficit. Second of all, this is also from coverage of this CNN poll from the Wall Street Journal today. Listen to this, you're going to love this. Among all voters, so this is Biden's fault, that's what the American people say. Look at this. Among all voters, Biden remains a bit of a disadvantage relative to Trump, CNN says from its poll, in terms of the share of voters who have ruled out voting for him. 52% of Americans say there is no chance they will support Biden. I repeat, CNN says among all voters, 52% of all voters say there's no chance they're going to support Biden. 52%! More than half of our country says there's no chance they will support Biden. 47% say there's no chance they're going to support Trump. So do you hear this? By a margin of 5 points, more people, 5% more voters, say they will never support Biden. So Biden's underwater 5 points with people who say they will never vote for him versus Trump. Wow. The majority of voters say there's a chance they'll vote for Trump. The majority of voters say there's not a chance they will vote for Biden. Amazing, isn't it? Doesn't mean we got this. It means people are coming to terms with what they believe, who is to blame for this economy, the world wars in the country, the unstable, the destabilization of the Middle East, the increase of gas prices, the skyrocketing inflation. In fact, here's your last piece to share with you that's stunning. Are you ready for this? This is a separate poll that came out, I believe, yesterday. Gallup poll. It says, Gallup poll says, that Joe Biden is the historically lowest approval average in apparently history at this time of his presidency. All right, right here. Jimmy Carter is this brand new Gallup poll. Jimmy Carter is the only other president with a sub 50% average in his 13th quarter at this very point in the presidency. 3 of the 4 prior presidents who had a 13th quarter approval rating averages below 50% lost their reelection bids with the exception of Obama. Eisenhower at this point, 73. Nixon, 53%. Carter, 47. Reagan, 54. Bush, George H.W. Bush, who lost 41%. Clinton, 53. George W. Bush, 51. Obama, 45. Trump, 46. Biden, 38. He's lower than Carter. Carter is ahead of him by 9 points right now, and Carter lost. 9 points behind Carter. No one. The closest person at this point in the presidency with this low of a rating was Hussein Obama at 45 points. Trump was at 46. Hussein Obama won, but Biden is 7 points below where Hussein Obama was. Stick a fork in him. I mean, not for sure, but looking good for us. Doesn't mean it's going to be the end and we're going to get it.